It's now my great pleasure to introduce to you Professor Scott Shenker.
I have been had. So, this is a true story. Backstage, I went up to Ross and I said, if you upstage me, I'm going to kill you. Ross, you are a dead man. So I'm not going to try and compete with his humor, certainly not with his singing. But I do have a serious message, and I'm sorry if I do not live up to your expectations of a good time. Today we celebrate the end to your many years of study and mark the beginning of your life beyond Berkeley. I am honored and humbled to be chosen as your faculty speaker. I wrote those words before I knew that Ross was going to go before me. Now I'm just scared to death that I'm your faculty speaker. But rather than the lighthearted mixture of humor and advice that you were hoping for, this talk will be your worst nightmare. Because today, just when you thought you were finally done with school, I will assign you homework that will last the rest of your lives. Unfortunately, that's not a joke. But let me start with some historical context. Like most Americans my age, by the time I was 12, I had seen a full-scale military conflict with an active draft, a Cold War that required us to practice for nuclear attacks, several assassinations, including that of our president, and countless riots and massive demonstrations. And for years, our society was bitterly divided on such core issues as civil rights, feminism, and the Vietnam War. Despite these frequent periods of strife, I never questioned the vitality of our democracy because the leadership of the two major parties had a strong consensus on three principles. First, partisan politics should never thwart the normal workings of government. Second, government policies, no matter what their underlying ideology, should be based on reality. And third, artificial barriers to voting should be eliminated. This consensus meant that no matter how deep our disagreements, we had a government devoted to solving our problems, reliant on facts, and committed to broad voter participation. We vehemently argued over policies, but in the end, we were one nation, indivisible, whose goal, though imperfectly realized, was liberty and justice for all. However, it has become increasingly obvious over the past decade that this consensus no longer holds. Today, many politicians have no interest in making government work and actually take delight in its failures. They have no respect for the truth, lying without conscience or consequence, and they actively discourage voter participation, believing that winning elections by any means necessary is more important than engaging the electorate at large. Now, this may seem normal to you, since this is the only political environment you have ever known. But I can assure you this is a remarkable departure from the norm in this country and a grave threat to our democracy. A country where many politicians do not believe in governing, do not believe in the truth, and do not believe in voting rights cannot long remain a democracy. In fact, the events of this past week leave little doubt that our democracy and the rule of law are in clear and present danger. How did we arrive at this sorry state? In a word, complacency. More specifically, my generation's complacency. When I was born, schools were segregated, homosexuals were closeted, and women were systematically devalued. During my youth, our country made great progress in these areas, which seemed to prove Martin Luther King's famous phrase, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Seduced by this early success, we thought this quote described the inevitable path of history and assumed that justice would come without our active intervention. But we were so very wrong. This quote, which is rooted in a century of theology and thought, should carry a very different meaning, one that tempers our expectations while calling us to action. Rather than telling us that justice is easily achieved, these words should warn us that even if we devote all our efforts to the cause of justice, the most we can hope for is a gradual bending towards that goal. And that if we do not devote ourselves to justice, then the moral arc of history, like a tightly drawn bow, will snap back, driven by our baser natures towards the primitive and profane. We have recently seen this dynamic in action. Due to my generation's passivity, where justice was not pursued with adequate vigor, we are now experiencing a shocking resurgence of sexism, racism, and hatred. Why am I telling you all this on your graduation day? Because I have heard many of you complain about the state of this country and about how you feel powerless to affect change. The paralyzed politics over this past decade has created a dangerous mixture of frustration and helplessness. Never in my lifetime have people had so little faith in government and so little belief in their ability to improve it. But I stand here today to tell you that you already have all the power you need, that nothing stands in your way. If we break down our population by age groups, the youngest voters, ages 18 to 34, are now the largest voting bloc, recently surpassing my generation of baby boomers. Unfortunately, your recent voting rate is significantly less than that of other age groups. If you were to increase that participation rate, your additional votes could have shifted roughly 11 states in this past election, along with 5 Senate races, turning red states blue and blue states red, however you desired. The simple truth is that your vote can determine who controls our government. Thus, to exert your influence, you need not ask for permission. You need not march and protest. You need not pound at the gates of power. You need only vote. What does this have to do with your lifelong assignment? To explain, let me return to King's quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." What we must never forget is that this moral arc is not cast in stone nor divine from above. No, it is forged by the depth of our compassion and the strength of our commitment. The legacy of each generation lies in the justice it delivers and in the mercy it engenders. So your assignment is quite simple. Create the next segment of this arc and bend it towards justice. Change the moral universe by righting some of our many wrongs. Make your generation's legacy represent the very best of you. But do not expect instant success. At this point, the first step towards justice must be to reinvigorate our democracy. Meaningful change will only be possible after we restore the critical consensus on taking governing reality and voting rights seriously. Demand adherence to these basic principles from your politicians and your peers, and thereby renew our commitment to a politics driven not by divisiveness and dishonesty, but by basic decency and a devotion to the common good. My talk is unquestionably political, but it is also scrupulously nonpartisan. My focus is not on a particular party or policy, but on the fate of our democracy. My concern is not who wins elections, but the nature of our political discourse and the quality of our resulting government. These issues lie at the heart of what it means to be American, at the core of why we formed this more perfect union over 200 years ago. At Gettysburg, Lincoln called on all Americans to rededicate themselves to the great task of ensuring that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Today, I ask no less of you. After all the speeches are done, you will leave this graduation ceremony with a diploma proudly in hand, and soon turn your attention to jobs, family, and other worldly concerns. I wish you good luck and great joy in these endeavors. But as you leave, remember that you also hold our future in your hands. You have the power to reshape our body politic to your will just by paying attention and voting with clarity and purpose. And that simple act can revive our democracy and put us back on a course towards justice. This is a defining moment for each of you as individuals and for you collectively as a generation. This is your chance to leave your mark on history, to determine the course of the moral universe, to create your own legacy of justice and mercy. The opportunity is clear. The stakes are immense. The time is now. The rest is up to you.
Thank you so much, Scott, for such an inspiring speech.